So when Beacon got started just over 20 years ago now, we first were meeting in a hotel over on Stewart Ave. And so there was a meeting room that they had up in the front, and kids ministries was weirdly like upstairs away, like it was weird. But it's what we had. It's, it was a guy Conrad knew, and, that was it. That's how we got there. And he was giving us a great deal, and we were meeting on Sunday nights. Well, we were going to be a totally different kind of a church. Back in the day, there were very few churches like Beacon right here in the middle of the county. And so we were young, and we were cool, and everything we did was going to be super cool. And every detail we thought about, how we were going to do things differently, and it was going to just feel and look, and because we're not going to be like that kind of a church, we're going to be this kind of a church, and we got to really work it all. And so one of the decisions that I had made was I don't like the old offering plates that churches use, that many of you grew up with. You know the one I'm talking about, right? They're usually like this big, like platters, and they're often either gold or silver. And then what inside them, remember what was inside them? Some sort of like red felt or red velvet or something like that. And so you had these like big gold dishes. Does anybody else remember these things? Right? Some of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, because you grew up with those things. I was like, those things are so lame. We're going to get some cool ones. Or you get the stick with the basket, right? They have like a bag on the bottom, and they put a stick down in front of you, and if you don't put anything in, they're like, hey, like we're still waiting. The stick is sitting in front of you. And they also, for some reason, have like a red velvet basket or bag, which is, I don't know who in the world decided red velvet was the color of offering at church, but someone decided and got a lock on that whole market. But we were going to do something different. So I went over to Pier 1, and some of you were like, Pier 1? I don't even remember Pier 1. Pier 1 was a place that sold stuff like this. And I went over there because I wanted really cool offering baskets. And I thought this was really cool, right? It's pretty cool, right? As an offering basket. And I was like, yeah. As soon as people see it, they're going to know that we're different and we're cool. And so the only problem is I forgot to tell anyone that these were the offering baskets. And so the cafe crew also thought they were very cool, especially to hold like stirrers and sugars and things like that. And so they grabbed them, and they assumed they were part of the setup for the cafe crew. And so there they are sitting at the very back of this hotel room, coffee and the offering basket sitting there filled with little creamers and sugars and whatever else was in there. Well, it comes time to receive the evening offering, Sunday night services. And Conrad, many of you know Conrad, he was our usher that night, and we only needed the one usher because, there was like 20 of us or something in the room at the time. And so I called for the usher to come and receive the evening offering, and he looks around and he realizes, I don't have anything to receive the offering with. Of course, it's like right behind him sitting on the cafe table. I don't know why he just didn't grab it and dump everything out on the table and use because of course no one told him that it was the offering basket. So Conrad ends up going down the center aisle and just receives the offering by hand. Can you imagine being like, and he was like just taking it, he's like, I don't know what he's gonna stuff it. Like, what do you do then? It's like already just like such a fiasco. And that was just one of countless thousands of stories where things don't work out, bad ideas, terrible communication, and we have so many of them at Beacon that the team has often started using, this little phrase, a little saying, which is, how are we still open? How are we still open? In fact, something was going on this morning, and Chris Bell turns to me, she's like, how are we still open? And I was like, yes, that's exactly right. How in the world are we still open? We don't even know how to receive the offering. You'd think that would be something you would have thought through, on your very first day as a church. I don't know how we are still open, but I do know why we are open. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, this is Commitment Sunday. Trevor has already sort of given us a little bit of an update on it. I want to give you guys a quick update on kind of the whole big plan. You guys know we're looking at getting a new building. And if you remember, pretty exciting, You know, if you remember when we announced all of this, that October 31st was the day we were supposed to close because we expected the Attorney General approval in September. That didn't happen. It is still sitting on someone's desk somewhere. And that approval that we wait for is up to the Attorney General and their timeline. It's between them and the synagogue that is selling the building. And so there's not much we can actually do except pray and wait. So that's what we're doing. However, our timeline is we want to move into our new space on January 1st, mostly because we really want to move and also because our lease here ends December 31st. So that's a bit of a motivator. And so our lease here ends. We're going to be starting to meet over there. And the way we're going to be doing that is we've asked them if they would write us a lease pending the sale. And so there's no additional charges or anything like that from them. They're largely just going to let us start using the space in January as if we had largely owned it. And we'll just be paying as our part of it, paying the expenses of the building. And so that is the current plan. That lease agreement should be signed this week. And so between building the beacon and Commitment Sunday and us getting a lease, it looks like everything is working out wonderfully as we await the Attorney General approval. That's kind of just some of the back office, plans and things that are going on. I just kind of wanted to give you an update since today we should have been saying, woo, we have a new building, but we don't yet. So now, this is the last week of the Building the Beacon Kickoff Initiative. And what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to talk to all of you who are still undecided about participating in the financial aspect of building the beacon. That's sort of what I was supposed to do. And I'm supposed to sort of give you a big encouragement and a charge and a challenge to do that. And so if that is you, if you're here and you are not yet decided, then here it is. Ready? Keep praying and then do whatever God tells you to do. Okay? Now, for the rest of you, you've probably, like Cheryl and I, you've already thought about it, you've prayed about it, you've listened to God, you've been working through the devotional, and you've been doing all of the stuff that we've asked you to do all along, which means you actually are pretty confident where God has you and what his plan is for you and your participation in building the beacon, which means this started dawning on me, and I was like, so then what am I going to talk about today? Because, there it is. I've encouraged those who are still on the fence, and the rest of you are probably pretty much ready. So I decided, instead of doing kind of that stuff, I decided today I wanted to finish up the Jonathan story. Because we have one last part of the Jonathan story that we've kind of been dipping into that I really, really want to share because it's one of my most, personally, one of the most exciting parts of God's promise to us. So are we good to kind of jump into that and head in that direction here this morning? All right, so you know the background. The nation of Israel was facing a very fierce enemy. This is by way of review if you missed some of it. Saul and his son Jonathan and the men with them were staying in Gibeah in Benjamin while the Philistines, and this is the enemy that they're facing, a fierce and violent enemy, camped at Michmash. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel because the Philistines had said, otherwise, the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plow points, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened. So on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or spear in their hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them. Now, a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. Now, all of Israel had to go down with it. And the reason I highlight that is because imagine what it is like to be so thoroughly oppressed by an enemy that you actually can't even sharpen your farming tools. You can't even chop wood because your axe is too dull. Your family, you want to provide for your family. You want to help keep them warm. And you go out there to chop wood so that you could put it in the fire so you can keep your family warm on a cold night. And you have to go down to your enemies and pay them for even the sharpening of your iron tools. They had so thoroughly disarmed and humiliated the people of God that they had to go down there and actually get their plows and their implements and their cattle prods sharpened. You can't cut wheat for sale or to feed your kids unless you actually go down and submit yourselves before this oppressive army. This is a brutal and fierce enemy. And it was so bad that the whole of the nation had been reduced to having only 2 swords. That's it. Heavily armed enemy, and there are only 2 weapons that remain in the whole of the land. And of course, the Philistines had gone out at the pass at Michmash. They were on the move. They were ready to start conquering and taking more and more land from this now thoroughly oppressed people. The people of God and the people that God is trying to reach are being oppressed by a fierce enemy. And this is extremely important for followers of Jesus to remember. We read these stories and we think to ourselves, oh, that was them. This was a physical army, and that is all true, but we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. If you think their situation was dire, ours is far worse. And the people around us are facing certain oppression from this enemy. Now, while this is going on, Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron, and with him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother, Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. A whole lot of names here. Why? Why all this detail? Because the author here is trying to paint us a very clear picture of what's going on. Saul, the king of Israel, has at his disposal the generals of the army, what remains of the army. He has half the weapons in all of Israel. All right, it's only 1 sword, but it is half of the swords in all of Israel. And he has the priest, and the priest has the ephod. And this would have been a way that they would have sought God's will to know what they were supposed to do next. So here he is sitting with the political power and the military power and the religious power and all of it there at his disposal, and he's sitting under a pomegranate tree. He's supposed to be rescuing the people. And there are a whole lot of Christians who sit around and do nothing while the enemy has his way. And Christians sit around on the sidelines, worried about this thing or worried about that thing or doing our little thing, rather than taking the fight back to the enemy. This is the story of much of American Christianity. Jonathan, though, he said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." I won't do too much on this one. They talked about this a lot in the previous weeks. If you want to hear about that, check out the other messages. But this is one of my favorite little bits of the whole Bible. Come, let's go over and pick a fight with the enemies of God's people. Let's go pick a fight, see what happens. Maybe, just maybe, God will show up. And while some Christians sit under the pomegranate tree, others will get off their butts and they will trust that when they go and take the battle into the enemy's territory, that God will show up. Perhaps God will do something unexpected, even using my little bits that I can bring, even using my limited skills, my tiny talents, my small investment. Who knows? I mean, I have half the weapons in all of Israel. Who knows what God will do? It feels like that sword needs to start swinging. Jonathan, he's getting antsy, and he decides to see if God will show up. His armor bearer, of course, we saw this in a previous week. Do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. This is one of the things we've been asking you guys all to do. Pray, seek God, ask for his will, and then do what God puts on your heart. And when you're putting yourself in a place of spiritual surrender before God, then we get to hear from him. We get to be nudged by the Spirit. We get to experience these promises in a very real-time sort of way. And so it is our conviction that if you have laid, and I know we have, if you have laid yourself open before God in surrender, then whatever happens next is God's will and plan for our congregation. And so we're excited. We get to step into faith and excitement and courage. Some people are saying, well, what if you guys, you don't hit the goal? What if if we fall short? And then we do. I'm not trying to downplay and say, don't worry about it. Every one of us ought to be able to bring whatever it is that God puts upon our hearts, and sacrifice for each of us is the name of the game when it comes to this whole conversation. But whatever happens, you've done what we had asked. You've put yourself before God in a position of surrender. This is fantastic. And whatever happens next, we get to know that God is doing this work in our midst. Now, first, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hands of Israel. Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet. Now, this is really cool because we showed these pictures, but this is steep ravines. He actually had to climb up with his hands and feet. Now, if you've ever had to do that, this is no easy task. This is actually very, very difficult. Climbing up hands and feet on your hands and knees. You're sliding back down. You're exhausted by the time you get up there. I was hunting. It was even 2 months ago or something like that. And I was climbing up a pretty steep ravine up on the North Shore. And I grabbed a branch that I thought would hold me, and it didn't. But I put all of my weight on that thing. And it gave way. It snapped, and all of a sudden I found myself just slowly going backwards. I was like, oh, this is going to hurt. And sure enough, I tumbled backwards. Boom, 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 boom. Feet overhead, down 20, 30 feet. And I get up, I shake it off. I'm like, oh, man, I was heading down kind of toward the water. And I was like, all right, so that happened. And I just get down on my hands and knees, and I start climbing right back up this hill. And I'm literally on my hands and knees now trying to climb back up. And I get up there. I was exhausted. I was bloodied. I had scrapes and scars all over. I had this thing on my head. And then I was like, oh, all right, this is, hands and feet. What Jonathan did here, he gave it his all. He's going all in. And he's doing it right before a battle. He should have every expectation, like he's going to get to the top of the hill and be like, okay, guys, hold on. Just give me a second. I'm out of breath. But I got a sword. Just give me a minute. I'm sure that's not what happened. I'm sure the battle ensued immediately. Immediately. And what takes place then was crazy. The Philistines fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer followed. He killed behind him in that first attack. Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. 20 guys. Now, I'm pretty sure that if I had to, I don't want to, but if I had to, I could take a 5'9", 189-pound, 54-year-old man in hand-to-hand combat. I'm pretty sure I could do it. I don't know if that's true. I guess if anybody wants to test it, I can see you after. No, I'm just kidding. But 2 of them, I'm kind of getting in over my head. 5, it's going to be a beatdown that I'm not going to enjoy. 20 to 1, hardened soldiers. Imagine that. This was Jonathan's exceedingly abundantly more than he could have ever hoped or imagined moment. The entire outpost is destroyed. This is how God shows up. This is how Jonathan gets to go, wow, he did it. God did it. He allowed me in this condition with just this one guy who doesn't have a sword to do this incredible route. That was exceedingly abundantly more, a 20-fold return on that risk and investment. That's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. But here's the thing. God isn't finished yet. This would be enough. This would be enough of a story to find encouragement and hope and courage in. But it's only the beginning for God. See, at some point now, we're about to see that this fuse that Jonathan and his armor bearer lit, there's no way for them to see where it's going to end. They don't know what impact they're going to have in the future. Because soon God's about to do the part that simply was unexpected and unexplainable. The panic struck the whole army. Remember, there were multiple outposts and a giant army. Panic struck the whole army. How? Why? Those in the camp and the field and those in the outposts and the raiding parties, wherever the Philistines found themselves, even separated by great distances, panic struck all of them. And the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. Saul was talking to the priest. The tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. They're watching it. They got people watching over the camp, trying to keep it out, spying on them, and all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, things go crazy in the camp. And all of a sudden, they're getting word that all of the outposts and all of the raiding parties, things are going crazy. There's something. How and what's going on? It's a panic sent by God. The part that Jonathan could do, Jonathan did. Bloodied, bruised, exhausted, swinging that sword, everything he could do. And God rewarded that with this incredible thing. But then God showed up in a completely unexpected way. And he shakes the ground. Can you imagine it? Right? Stomp all you want, right? Let's all get it. We can all stomp all we want. You're not going to shake the ground in such a way that panic will rise up in the hearts of all of the enemies of God's people. This is the work that only God will do. But it does raise an interesting theological question. Would any of this have happened if Jonathan and his armor bearer hadn't lit that fuse? Because it seems like the answer is no. If it was just Saul sitting under the pomegranate tree, I don't think anything else happens like this. God shows up almost in response, going so far beyond what Jonathan could have anticipated. Now watch this. Rapid fire action now takes place. Then Saul and his men assembled and went to battle. Wait, because of Jonathan and his armor bearer, Saul finally gets up off his butt. And he does something awesome. They found the Philistines in total confusion. What would it be like if the people of God, when we showed up and we prayed and we served and we sacrificed and we gave and we had the courage to speak the name of Jesus in the way that we are being called by God to speak the name of Jesus? Imagine if the enemies of God, if the principalities and powers of this dark age, if the spiritual forces of darkness were thrown into total confusion. It seems like this is exactly the way God intends us to understand what happens even in the spiritual realm. Striking each other with their swords. The Philistines start killing each other. We look at it and Saul's like, oh man, I got one lousy sword. Jonathan's like, I got half the weapons in all of Israel. And God's like, don't worry about swords at all, guys. I got plenty of swords at my disposal in a way that you never would have imagined or anticipated. I got more swords than I would ever need for my people to be free from this enemy. Then the Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines, so the turncoats, the traitors, they had gone up with them to their camp. They thought they were throwing in with the winners. They turn around and join up forces with Saul and Jonathan. And the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country. That means all the people that got so scared that they just simply went into hiding. I think in terms of the Christians who have just decided to sort of pull back and stay out of the fight and be out of the challenge. What if, in fact, that the work that we do here, the lighting of this fuse, that the faith of a Jonathan can actually give boldness and courage to the many Christians who have decided to sit on the sidelines or decided to hide or to forget to tell the truth about who they are, to speak it in front of the people who need to hear it? What if they also were able to join in this battle in hot pursuit? So on that day, not Jonathan and not Saul, but the Lord saved Israel. When the battle moves beyond its current bounds, and all of a sudden, Saul, he stopped pursuing the Philistines. Why? Why would he stop pursuing them? Because they'd withdrawn to their own land. The Philistines left the land of Israel because of the fuse that Jonathan and his armor bearer set. Saul then assumed rule over Israel. He fought against their enemies on every side. This does not sound like the Saul that we had just been reading about. Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hands of those who had plundered them. The whole of the situation is now changed. Israel has turned the tide. They're now fighting against their enemies on every front, and God is giving them victory. Nobody is sitting under a pomegranate tree anymore. Imagine what it would be like to see the work of God explode and expand all over the island, all throughout New York, because of the faithfulness of a few who are willing to see what God would do. This is the promise that we're given in the scriptures. This is what your investment does. This is what your acts of service and your acts of love and your prayers against the powers of darkness. This is the lighting of the fuse. And God says, not only am I going to do exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever hope or imagine in your life, I am going to do that. And I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to do stuff you won't even hear about till heaven. I'm going to do stuff from those offerings that you won't even be able to see or imagine. Years ago, when I first came to the island, like 27 years ago, I was working at then Manhasset Baptist Church. It became Shelter Rock Church. And this is the garden of their Manhasset location, this little garden up here. It still pretty much looks a lot like this. And Henry Lipholt used to tend to this garden. It was kind of his own thing. It became his sort of like ministry and mission. And Henry was an older man, kind of old school in a lot of his ways, and a curmudgeon. I'd called Henry a curmudgeon many a times behind his back and quite a few times to his face. He was an older man. I was a younger guy. We did not see eye to eye on a whole lot of different things. And so we would argue, we would debate, we would fight. But we tried to get along and mostly did. But one day, a couple comes to the church, Sarah and Kurt Powell. And I asked them, hey, how did you come to the church? And they said, we were driving down Plandome Road and we saw the gardens. I'm like, oh, great, Henry's Gardens. And we liked them. We thought they were pretty. So we came to church. I was like, okay, well, whatever it takes, you're here. Great, fantastic. Ends up, they start growing up in faith. They come to faith. And they get real excited about their newfound faith. And one day, while on the train, Sarah, she was a very kind of an extroverted, social, kind of a butterfly woman and a great soul. And she met a guy on the train who was also an extrovert and very talkative and chatty, Conrad, who many of you know. Well, she invited Conrad to the church with the cool flowers, Henry's flowers. And so they come to church. And Conrad and Kelly come grow in faith. Conrad gets saved. And we have Bible study at our house. We become the best of friends. And some years later, they decide to help start a church with us, Beacon. They were the first two people to sign on. They were the first two to say, I'm in. We're going to do this thing together. Actually, Kelly said they were in. Conrad said he had to think about it and pray about it and all this other stuff. But anyway, but eventually he got on board. They said they're in. They started working and doing the work of the kingdom here and fighting against the enemies of God. And as they do that, more and more of you start to attend. And we start to see marriages put together, and we get to see lives turned around, and we get to see lonely people finding community, and we get to find a whole lot of lost people who find Jesus as Savior. They're raising kids. David is one of their kids. I told David I was going to tell him this, but I didn't tell him what I was going to say, so this is going to get awkward for him for just a second. They start raising their kids. And recently, David is newly engaged to Abigail, the Hoffmans. So now that it's all so public, don't blow it. But David came to me one day, and we were just chit-chatting about what it means to be a man of God and to have a relationship and to be dating and engaged and then married with holiness and integrity. What does it look like? What is it? Here's what I'm thinking. Here's how it works. I'm watching another generation rise up because of Henry's flowers. Because of Henry's flowers. You can track this all the way. Henry would have had no idea where his small offering would end. And there are countless stories like this, more than we could ever even number. When we think about what's happening next for us, David and Abigail, they'll be doing their own ministry and their own work for the rest of their lives. Henry will be a part of that story. When we leave this space, we are transitioning it over to another church, Hope East, some friends of ours who are ironically not too far from the Manhasset campus. And we're helping them get up and running with all the portable gear and make sure they can kind of do all of the stuff that we've been doing here so that their church can thrive and grow in this space. Thanks to Henry's flowers. Thanks to his offering. Our new friends at the synagogue. We get to talk openly about the love of Messiah and his sacrifices. How would Henry have ever imagined that? He did his part that God was calling him to do. And the stories just unfold for generations. Now, the text tells us the panic struck the whole army. And those in the camp, in the field, and those in the outposts and the raiding parties, the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. And there ought to be a panic that the world has when they stand before a holy and righteous God. And without the message of the cross, all of humanity stands under the shadow of condemnation and separation from the creator of the universe because of our sin and our rebellion. This is a panic sent by God. This is a terror that ought to strike into the hearts of every person who will be able to hear it. And we get to stand in the gap. We get to do our part for that. We get to tell the story about a Savior who so desperately loves them that they can find their way back to God. I absolutely do not know how we are still open. But I do know why we are still open. Because lost people matter to God. And they ought to matter to us. And God will take our offering and he will do something amazing here in our midst and in our lives and in our 20-fold incredible investment we will see, and we will be so excited, but there will be another work that only God will know of, and it will be a ground-shaking, terror-defeating kind of work, because that's the kind of God we serve. I'm going to ask the band to come out as we prepare for our actual commitment time here. And in just a minute, we're going to be asking you guys to take a moment to pray. Wherever it is that you're at, maybe today is the day that you were thinking, all right, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait till Sunday and figure that all out. Then awesome. Then maybe take another couple of moments to pray. Pray as a couple, pray as families. If that's where you're at, you might also just be ready to do what God has put upon your heart. Wonderful, however it is and wherever it is. Maybe you're not really sure. No pressure. Don't feel any sort of, this is not about guilt or shame or anything like that whatsoever. God loves a cheerful giver. And so be ready to give when that is what God is doing in your heart. And then we're going to invite you guys at any time, during the song here. I'm going to continue to pray. I'm going to ask all of you just to continue to pray as the band plays some music. And then you can put your first fruits offering and your commitment card there in the box. And then grab next to it a coin. It's a commitment coin. We're calling it our all-in coin. And it's just a way kind of to mark this moment and be a memorial token for us. And then help yourself to some of the elements of communion and bring them back to your seat and just hold them there for just a moment. Don't take the communion elements yet. We're going to take them all together in just a few moments. So would you stand with us now and spend a little bit of time in prayer and then come on up when you are ready.